To this community.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had a program in Konya, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
I saw something online where you said it was in September. Yeah, like September
20?
August, sorry.
Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Thumma amma ba'd, to proceed. So, this is not, like a very formal lecture. It's like a small number of people. So please, just interrupt us if you want to interrupt, or if you want to add something or comment or object or anything. So today we're just talking about Tazkiyah, and we're talking about the importance of basically addressing the illnesses of the nafs, and looking a little bit inward and being a little bit more introspective about our conditions and different states of the heart. You'll find that the heart is called qalb لتقلبه. The heart is called qalb because it flips, تتقلب, it changes, it's often changing. And what made me particularly interested in the topics of Tazkiyah, or pay attention to the topics of Tazkiyah, is a hadith that I heard when I was younger, not a hadith, an asr, that I heard when I was younger, from Ibn Abi Mulaika, who said that I have met 30 of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Each and every one of them feared for themselves, feared from hypocrisy, or feared hypocrisy for themselves. And that asar was, pretty interesting for me, because I couldn't wrap my head around it, because I thought that it's just like unthinkable for 30 of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ to be afraid of hypocrisy, because I felt that I was not afraid of hypocrisy. I felt that when I go home, I pray, if I don't pray in front of the people, I'm still praying. I felt that, when I fast in Ramadan, I don't cheat. I was, young, and so my parents were not watching me, and I wasn't cheating. I wasn't basically storing food in the bedroom and eating during the day. So I thought that this is pretty much all it takes to not be a hypocrite. I thought that, hypocrisy is basically to show something otherwise, to have a complete sort of dissociation between the exterior and interior, like a completely opposite exterior and interior. And that's actually true for, the full-blown hypocrisy. But that's probably not what the Sahaba were afraid of. When Ibn Abi Mulaika said each one of them was afraid of hypocrisy, probably that's not what the Sahaba were afraid of. So I kept on thinking about this, and then you come across a hadith also that are sort of disconcerting to the heart, like when the Prophet ﷺ says, إن الرجل يعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى إذا ما كان بينه وبينها إلا ذراع يسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها. That a man could do the works of the people of paradise until there is only an arm span between him and paradise, and then destiny overtakes him, and then he does the works of the people of the hellfire and enters the hellfire. And that was very disconcerting for me, like as a child, or even a teenager, because it just felt, I have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have good thoughts of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, why would Allah want to do this to someone after they have been committed, sincerely committed to His service, up until death or close to death? And then I started to notice certain things. Also, the hadith of أكثر منافقي أمتي قراءها was also like a concerning hadith to me, where the Prophet ﷺ says, most hypocritical of my ummah are the qurra. And qurra is not necessarily scholars, and it's not necessarily reciters. Like if you literally translate it, it would translate into reciters. And sometimes we will translate this as scholars because the Qurra of the Sahaba are the scholars of the Sahaba. They used the word Qurra to refer to the scholars. But this is not, even though scholars have been sometimes mentioned in a negative sense, but the Prophet ﷺ said, أخف ما أخاف عليكم كل منافق عليم بالله. So the people that I fear the most for you are the hypocrites who have the knowledge of the tongue. Alim al-lisan, they have the knowledge of the tongue. But this hadith, Qurra in this hadith means the learned class, the learned class. So it's a word that would basically combine the scholars and students of knowledge, those who are into learning, into knowledge, and into learning. This was also a little bit hard for me, or hard on me, to figure out. And then I started to notice certain things. I started to notice that, some of the people who are religious, regardless of their background, regardless of their religious orientation, or regardless of their background, but they tend to be like sometimes like too partisan, that يفجرون في الخصومة, in other words, that they're like very wicked when they become adversarial towards somebody, or they have like conflict with someone, they become very sort of wicked, fujur, wickedness. And then I also started to notice that like sometimes people who are like pretty practicing, pretty strict with their practice and so on, they tend to have broken families, like not infrequently. And then when I started to provide like some counseling, like family counseling and stuff like this, I started to notice that they're different. Like I just can't, like I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this was happening in sort of religious families. And that's when I started to realize, as the Prophet ﷺ said, خيركم خيركم لنسائهم وخيركم لأهله وأنا خيركم لأهلي. So the best of you are the best of you to their wives or women, and I'm the best of you to my wives. So I started to notice that people can wear a mask when they're outside, and then they can't keep the mask at home because it's just like too hard to stay masked all the time. So they have to drop the mask at some point, and that usually happens at home because the stakes are not as high as things are a little bit more private, and things are a little bit more concealed. They don't lose their reputation. The wives are likely not going to go out and tell about them and stuff like this. So the mask tends to fall off at home. And then, you start to notice also that identitarian religiosity, so faith goes through phases. Like when you're a child, you don't necessarily understand the superiority of Tawheed over Trinity or polytheism. A 5 or 6 year old, if you talk to them about the Trinity and how does it make sense, that they're probably not going to understand very well, although the fitra, that the natural disposition basically directs us to Tawheed. But then, most of the children are Muslim because they come from Muslim families. I'm Muslim because Muslims are my people, my family is Muslim, and so on. That's called faith through association. The unfortunate thing is that many times people don't grow beyond this. So people neglect to grow in their faith beyond faith by association, and they continue to be sort of committed to identitarian religiosity. It becomes an identity, and they're just Muslim because they are Muslim. They come from a Muslim family, and that explains to you why most of the people in the world, they just don't switch religions. Because it becomes part of their identity, and then they're comfortable in one identity and then move on. I usually point out to converts that you're not immune to this, because when converts hear this, they think that no, that talk does not basically doesn't have anything to do with me, because I was not born Muslim. I was born Christian or Jewish or whatever, and then I converted to Islam. So identitarian religiosity, it's something that Muslims who are born Muslim can identify with their religion through, or with faith through identitarian religiosity. But the fact of the matter is, converts also can, after like 15 or 20 years in their religion, it becomes part of your identity, and you could still have that identitarian religiosity. Of course, for converts and for many adults, they grow beyond identitarian religiosity into ideological religiosity when you become convinced of your faith, and that usually happens in your teens and tweens. They start to learn about their faith, and they start to subscribe on they start to have some conviction. They learn the differences between different religions, and they become, Islam is the religion of the fitra after all, and monotheism makes the most sense. So they become comfortable with the monotheism of Islam. And then, some people don't grow beyond this. So it's either identitarian religiosity or ideological religiosity. They become persuaded, and that's faith through association, then faith through persuasion, and then after this, faith through experience, realization. When you realize your faith, when you taste the sweetness of faith, and that is the sort of basically the goal. The goal is to get there. That does not mean that you will not go through the different phases. Like as a child, we want you to identify as Muslim, so we want to grow that faith through association. We want to grow it. We want the community to be good to the kids so that they love their community and they identify with their community. We're not saying that we shouldn't be convincing, talking to teenagers about the superiority of Islamic ideology or Islamic creed. But we're saying that people should grow beyond this. So one of the things that I like that made me more interested in Tazkiyah also is that I found that some people, whether they leave Islam altogether or they become less practicing or non-practicing after seemingly having mastered the first two phases. They become they're very confident Muslims. They identify with Islam. They're very basically literate, very well versed in sort of the Islamic creed, Islamic theology, and then they just start to walk away, not necessarily apostatize, but they start to become less motivated. They lose the motivation, and they become less practicing, and to the point where sometimes they just become non-practicing. And I wondered, what is happening here? What's wrong here? And you remember the hadith of Abu Sufyan when Herakl said to him, "Do they leave their when he asked about the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, "Do they leave? هل يرتد أحد منهم سخطة لدينه?" Does any one of them leave because of resentment of their new religion? And Abu Sufyan said to him, no. And Herakl said to him, وَكَذَلِكَ الْإِيمَانِ إِذَا خَالَطَتْ حَلَاوَتُهُ بَشَاشَةَ الْقُلُوبِ. Likewise, when Iman, when the sweetness of Iman fills the heart with light, when the sweetness of Iman fills the heart with delight, people don't basically leave their religion. So I wondered, why is it that some people actually not necessarily leave altogether, but just become less practicing again, lose motivation. And all of this pointed to the fact that people don't grow in their faith. Yeah.
I was curious, did you have these thoughts and wonder all this before your Sharia studies, during or after you finished?
Well, the thoughts accompanied me since my childhood. I said that, like when I first heard the hadith of Ibn Abi, or the author of Ibn Abi Mulaika about the Sahaba fearing from hypocrisy, it triggered sort of like some thought in me, like how come, like why is it that I don't fear from hypocrisy? Why is it that I'm so confident that I'm not a hypocrite? And then to start to pay a little bit more attention uh, to the different shades of hypocrisy, the different grades of hypocrisy, the different illnesses of the heart. The fact that, you know, being praying 5 times a day or going to the masjid does not mean that you have arrived, wasalt. You know, Imam Ibn Qayyim actually says that قليل من الناس من توجه وقليل ممن توجه من أراد وقليل ممن أراد من قصد وقليل ممن قصد من وصل. So he was just talking about that a few people like face themselves in the right direction. Just the first thing you need to do, just face the right direction, and then have the will, and then have the sort of the motivation, the resolve, and then reach their goal. So it's you know it's not that easy. It's not that easy, and it requires effort, and it requires alertness to the need to put in effort, and the effort is not simply by increasing your ibadah, although this is an integral part of it, by paying attention, but also paying attention to the states of your heart, to your illnesses, and trying to figure out, what's wrong with you, what is buried there, like sort of underneath that veneer or that sort of layer of commitment and strictness that could make someone, يعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى إذا ما كان بينه وبينها إلا ذراع يسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها. So what is there? Then I just wanted to introduce Manâzil as-Sâirin to you today, because it's a book that actually addresses the different stations between al-Abd wal-Haq, between the servant and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the beginning of Manâzil as-Sâirin, which is a very good book, so of course the best commentary on it is Madarij, and Madarij is the best book written in the discipline is Madarij as-Salikin by Imam Ibn Qayyim. So Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah says in the introduction of Manâzil as-Sâirin, he was speaking about al-Kittani's statement that بين العبد والحق ألف منزل من منازل النور والظلمة, that there are like 1,000 different stations. But he said, I tried to, I feared that that would be too long to write about the 1,000 stations, so I kept them down to, or I limited them to 100 stations. So he divided the book into 10 sections. Each section is divided into 10 chapters. The book is 100 stations. In the introduction of the book, he talks about, he tries to explain his methodology, because the issue with Sufism and Tasawwuf, and certainly Abu Ismail, Imam al-Harawi rahimahullah, was like an icon of Tasawwuf. So the issue of Tasawwuf and Sufism, I write in the